Go ahead.
Good evening and welcome to the San Mateo Planning Commission meeting of April 27th, 2021. If you would all join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mary, would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Chair Mallory.
Present.
Vice Chair Maldonado.
Present.
Commissioner Ebnetter is absent. Commissioner Etheridge.
Present.
Commissioner Williams.
Present.
Thank you. I'm going to read a brief statement since we are still in COVID times and having virtual meetings. Due to the physical distancing protocols in place at this time, we continue to encourage public participation remotely. Information on how to provide public comment is explained at the bottom of the published agenda. There are two ways to participate. Join the Zoom meeting by clicking on the link at the top of the agenda. Use the raise your hand button to be called on at the appropriate time. Phone-in participation can be done by calling 408-638-0968 with the conference ID number 870-2908-1626 and passcode 753059. When the item of interest is opened for consideration, press *9 to raise your hand to be called on. When called upon, press *6 to unmute, state your name, and provide your comments. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for that specific item. Mary, would you give us direction on subtitles, please?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. I wanted to let you all know of a new feature available for this Zoom call. It's called Live Transcript. You should be being able to view it right now. However, if you are not interested in viewing the live transcript, I'm just going to tell you, you can go to the bottom of your screen. You're going to see something that says Live Transcript and an icon that says CC. You can click on it and put hide subtitles, and you will no longer see the subtitles. Anytime during the meeting, if you want to start them again, you can click on the live caption and you can start them again. So hopefully that's helpful to you.
Thank you. Our first order of business is our public comment period. During the public comment period, members of the public may speak on general items of interest within the Commission's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda. Each member of the public may speak for a maximum of 3 minutes with a maximum of 15 minutes for the entire public period. The Commission shall not act on or discuss any matters raised during the public comment period which are not on the agenda, but shall refer such matters to staff for review and or request such matters be placed on a future agenda. Mary, do we have anyone interested in speaking on the public comment period?
We do not.
I see that my script is out of order from the agenda, so I apologize for that. We will roll back to the consent calendar. Mary, will you introduce the consent calendar?
Yes. Item 1, Planning Commission meeting minutes. Approve the minutes of the special and regular Planning Commission, or the regular Planning Commission meetings of March 9th and March 23rd, 2021.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on the minutes or any comments?
None for me.
None for you? I don't see any nodding heads. No? Okay, is there a motion to approve those 2 minutes?
I motion that we approve the minutes from the March 9th and the March 23rd meeting.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thanks, Margaret. All those in favor, Mary, would you read a voice vote, please?
Yes. Chair Mallory,
Yes.
Vice Chair Maldonado,
Yes.
Chair Ebnetter is absent. Chair Etheridge,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Etheridge, sorry, and Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So it passes
Memory.
4-0. You'll always be the chair and I'm on Mike. Okay. So next order of business on the agenda is new business. Mary, would you introduce that?
Yes. Item number 2 is Bay Meadows Phase 2 Development Agreement Review, year 14 and 15, 2600 South Delaware Street, PA number 2020-065, resolution adoption.
Thank you. Julia.
Yes, good evening. Let me go ahead and share the presentation. And are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. As Mary had mentioned, this is for planning application 2020-065. My name is Julia Klein, acting planning manager. And in terms of the development agreement, there's going to be 2 parts to the presentation. So my presentation will cover the review periods for years 14 and 15. And then the applicant will provide a presentation that covers the context, the framework of the Bay Meadows master plan, as well as the relationship to the development agreement. And so it'll just provide background and historical context. So I'll go ahead and go on to the presentation. So just briefly, and again, the Wilson Meeting development team will provide more details, but the background for the Bay Meadows, as you'll see in this illustration, it covers about 18 blocks of development, and the overall specific plan area, as well as the development agreement, was approved by the City Council back in December 2005. The Planning Commission is required through the development agreement to undertake an annual review and determine whether the property owner has performed in good faith in terms of compliance with the terms of development agreement. So just an overall highlight of what the specific plan includes. So there's a base program that covers all 18 blocks, and it sets a threshold, maximum threshold, in terms of a net number of new housing units, and it ranges in different types of housing, from apartments to single family homes, as well as square footage. 1.25 million is the maximum square footage for office space. There's a maximum of a different mix of retail and restaurant space, as well as a private high school, 3 new public parks, as well as private open space. This is an illustration of what the maximum build out of Bay Meadows Phase 2 area could be once it's all done. Of course, each individual block, each individual building is coming in with an individual SPAR application. So this is more of an illustrative concept. And then as indicated in the staff report, the review period is for this time, it's covering 2 years. The applicant submitted the materials for the first year. The city staff did not have the ability to bring that forward at that time. So we're grouping the 2 annual reviews before the Planning Commission together with this meeting. As indicated, there's in the staff report, there's no specific items that are required for the developer to perform at this time. Generally, the applicant, the developer owner, has complied with the terms of the development agreement. And so this is verbatim from your staff report in terms of the staff recommendation. I won't go ahead and read it, but it will be here if you need it at the end. And that concludes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions, as well as Gabrielle if there's any legal questions. And then the applicant, I can introduce Whitney with the applicant team to introduce the rest of the team to give the presentation.
Okay, great. Thanks, Julia. Hi, everybody. My name is Whitney Welsh. I'm a project manager with Wilson Meany. And we have prepared a presentation today just as background for the commission. It includes an update on the project. I think you probably saw in Julia's staff report that there's been some meaningful progress on site this year. We have recently completed and just welcomed our first new residents to the Morgan, which is an 82-unit apartment building at Bay Meadows. We just opened Slices, a pizzeria. Bridge Housing completed the affordable housing on site earlier this year, and we've broken ground on 2 new office buildings. So things are really happening out there despite COVID and all of us, staying at home and connecting remotely. So hopefully we can have you all out there to sort of see some progress as soon as things open up a little bit more. Today, Amy Forbes with Gibson Dunn, who's an attorney that has worked with the city for many, many years on this agreement, will be kind of giving a background on the development agreement and just an overview for the benefit of everyone, because it's been a while since we've done this. And Janice Thatcher, who's partnered with Wilson Meany and has really led the charge with Bay Meadows so for a very long time, will be representing the development team with the update for you. So we're around and available to answer any questions at the end. And again, sometimes it's nice to have you out in person. So hopefully we can arrange that sometime soon. Amy, do you want to take over?
Yeah, I'll start. Thank you. Good
Okay.
evening.
Yep.
Good evening, commissioners. I'm Amy Forbes, as Whitney said. I've actually been working on this property almost 26 years. And I know that because I came back from my second maternity leave. So I dated from my second son, who's a 26-year-old college graduate, and we're just finishing up at Bay Meadows. So we thought it would make sense to kind of, as part of the update and check in on the development agreement, go back and talk a little bit about the history, where we are, and where we are finishing up with Bay Meadows. The original phase 1 of Bay Meadows was approved. Bay Meadows is phase 1 and phase 2. We really focus, that overhead focuses on phase 2. But there was an original phase 1 approved back in 97, started in 1995, that covered the 75-acre practice track and barn area at what was then Bay Meadows Racetrack. And at the time, it was designed to accommodate the corporate headquarters of Franklin Resources and come up with compatible mixed-use development, because Franklin Resources had indicated they were going to have to leave the city of San Mateo because there was no suitable place for them to locate their corporate headquarters. And the idea was to take the practice track and the barn area, redevelop that, and then keep the main track still operating. But as that project went forward, it proved quite successful. And at the same time, Caltrain started talking about plans for relocating the Hillsdale station. And so there was a 6-year planning process that was kicked off in about 1999 to create the San Mateo Rail Corridor Transit-Oriented Development Plan, which covered the entire Caltrain corridor in San Mateo. And the goal of that plan was to achieve a transit-oriented development adjacent to the right-of-way of Caltrain to take advantage of the planned transit improvements. And at the same time, because of the Hillsdale station, there was within that a transit-oriented development plan specifically for Bay Meadows main track that was created, was part of the same EIR. It was part of that same 6-year planning process to discuss how to handle and take advantage of this incredible transit improvement. So that was what we're focused on. That's what this phase 2 Bay Meadows specific plan amendment became. And that was associated also with a development agreement for the project. Next slide, please, Emily. Who has the slide? Ah, there it is. So the Bay Meadows phase 2 specific plan was designed to maximize the use of transportation alternatives to the private automobile. And I think the staff presentation talked about what the maximums were. There were also some built-in minimums. So there can be no fewer than 1,000 residential units, and there has to be at least 1 million square feet of office. So the idea was to create both employment opportunities and housing opportunities in a mix to take advantage of the proximity of transit and to minimize the overall trip generation. There would be enhanced opportunities for walking and biking, providing a linked system of bike paths, parks and open spaces, all located in close proximity to the Caltrain station. And then expanding employment opportunities to offset the loss of jobs that were going to be associated with the closure of the Bay Meadows racetrack, so that the city's economics would not be adversely affected, but in fact enhanced by the new development. And then there was to be an active pedestrian experience that would, so there's retail and ground floor activated uses was the planning concept, to make it an interesting place to walk. But there was a desire not to compete with Hillsdale Shopping Center and not to create a Burlingame Avenue or a Santana Row, but instead just have the retail needed to serve the project and make sense near the train station, recognizing there were other retail providers in the city that would remain the focus. And lastly, to create these fiscal surpluses so that, again, since the racetrack had been a huge economic engine that was clearly declining, but nonetheless still important to the city, that be replaced with other uses which would generate economic benefits to the city. So those were the goals. And the idea was to create a framework for development that was going to take place over a long period of time, with 1,000 units minimum for housing and 1 million square feet of office minimum. This was not a short-term development that was going to take place over the next year. It was going to take place over the next 18 years. And so a development agreement is a legislative response. It is authorized by state law, and it provides assurances to a developer that it can build a project, that it has a vested right. And they were created because there were a series of cases. The California Supreme Court held that unless a property owner had a building permit and had expended money in reliance on that specific permit, that property owner had no right to expect to be able to build its property out, to build anything. And so the legislature created this response of a development agreement to provide landowners with more certainty over a longer term development horizon. So a landowner could invest in a project up front and put in the infrastructure with the security of knowing it would nonetheless be able to build out over the long term in the city, 2 years in or 3 years in or 6 months in, couldn't change its mind and say, you know, we've decided we don't want to do that development after all. So it's codified in the government code. It has to be adopted by ordinance, so it has the force of law. It sets the development rights for whatever the period of time is in the development agreement. And unlike other project approvals that a city can approve, development agreements are not limited by constitutional limits. So you'll hear when you're doing normal project approvals that, oh, there has to be a nexus and there has to be a reasonable relationship. A development agreement asks and can ask for extraordinary public benefits in exchange for the rights to vest the project. Next slide, Emily. So why do you use them? Well, for long-term master plan projects where you have these big investments up front, if the later phases aren't assured to be able to be developed, then a developer doesn't feel comfortable investing. And without those assurances, long-term investment in a community is discouraged. So in the case of Bay Meadows, it was clear this project was going to take many, many years, but there was a massive infrastructure investment that was needed to accommodate the development long before the development occurred. So the city really wanted to get the funds to accelerate the grade separations and take advantage of the Caltrain improvements. This project provided that ability to do that. With the development agreement, the city provided a contractual assurance that the city would expeditiously process and grant the permits and approvals required to build out the phase 2 specific plan over an 18-year development horizon. That was the term of the agreement, as long as they were consistent with the specific plan. So development that was contained in the specific plan that had been reviewed by the city, the subject of environmental impact report, gone through planning commission hearings and city council hearings, they adopted the phase 2 specific plan. If that development would be permitted in exchange for the developer providing these extraordinary benefits. And so these were benefits beyond what the city could have otherwise obtained. So, and they were over $30 million in benefits above and beyond what was otherwise just the day-to-day mitigation that you can require through an EIR permitting process. As noted, 15 acres of new public parks. So it was an extraordinary amount of land that was dedicated to a public purpose. $100,000 each to Casanova Park and to Fiesta Gardens. A $50,000 contribution to a community arts campaign. There were $12 million in accelerated impact fees. So long before any building permits were pulled for units, there was a payment made to the city that the city could use as the local share for the JPB, the Joint Powers Board, to fund its local share of the grade separations, which are now becoming a reality. But for years were just a dream. And that this project gave the city the ability to meet its local share and get Caltrain to agree to put in the grade separations within the city. 10% inclusionary affordable housing across the neighborhoods, but on top of that, a 1 acre of land donation for an additional 68 affordable apartments. $250,000 for traffic calming measures in neighborhoods, and $1 million contribution to public arts. It was before the public art ordinance had been adopted citywide. And then the project maintains public street medians and open spaces like the town square privately, even though those spaces are available to the public. So it provides that public benefit of keeping the spaces up at no cost to the public. So the way the Bay Meadow project approvals are somewhat unique, and certainly within the city of San Mateo, I think they're unique. There's this specific plan that was adopted in 2005 that had a full EIR for the build out. It functions as the zoning for the project, and it has flexibility of use. There's not one, each use is not allocated to a specific parcel. Rather, it creates a framework of streets and a parcelization, but the actual build out is left to the discretion over time of the property owner depending on the market. It implements the community process in terms of the uses that it's limited to and the amount of development that is limited to, but otherwise it is intended to stay in place beyond the term of the development agreement. It is the zoning for the property, and even if the development agreement goes away, the specific plan will stay in place. The development agreement then was also approved at the same time as the specific plan. That's the contractual commitment that allows the developer the assurance that it can build out the specific plan. And that's the mechanism by which the city has extracted the extraordinary benefits. And as you heard tonight from staff, those benefits have all been, the developer has fully performed under the agreement and has met its side of the bargain. Then in 2006, there were design guidelines that were adopted as part of it was contemplated by the specific plan, which has detailed design controls on what the developments can look like. And lastly, at the bottom is the site plan and architectural review, which is an ongoing process as buildings are designed. And based upon this hierarchy that's created, it's limited solely to design review for consistency with the specific plan and the design guidelines. And in that sense, it's probably different than many of the SPARs you see, which are associated with a project that may have multiple approvals. In this case, the specific plan and basically the project approvals themselves happened 16 years ago. But the SPARs, which are the last step before the building permit, is the check by which the city makes sure that the actual buildings themselves are within the design controls that were previously adopted. The development agreement is 18 years. It was effective date was December of 2015. It's going to run through December of 2023. Zoning remains even if it's terminated. The timing and sequencing of the development is left completely at the developer's discretion, and there's a provision that specifically says that. And again, the mix of uses is determined by the developer as long as overall it falls within the envelope, the parameters of development called for by the specific plan. And there was an EIR certified for the specific plan itself. And so there's no need to go back and do environmental review for each little component because the project was looked at as a whole and mitigated as a whole. So new environmental review is only required for substantial changes, which could result in a new significant project impact that hasn't been studied. So this was what's been approved, and what the staff report said with the slight nuance that there is a base program, but there also was the ability to plump it up to 1.5 million square feet of office development, or up to 1,500 residential. But so the development had to stay within those parameters. So you could maximize residential and do the minimum commercial, or you could maximize commercial and do less residential. All of that was available. So but you have to, the minimum is 1,000 units and 1 million square feet of commercial. If you meet those minimums, the rest of the decisions regarding how much to have are up to the developer. And then the active use was that use that was designed to create a pedestrian environment linking the train station to the mixed use development. And that's along Delaware Street, and the town square. And active use was defined as the ground floor retail, neighborhood serving, pedestrian uses, banks, brokerage offices, lobbies, healthcare facilities, professional offices, things that made it interesting to walk down the street. The parking has a unique provision. It's a range, it's not fixed for both commercial and residential. And the parking is determined by parking demand studies over time, and their counts taken, and the parking requirements can shift depending on what the actual usage is. So it's trying to hit the sweet spot of having enough parking, but not being parking inefficient or requiring too many resources to go to parking when they could go to other places. So there's a flexible parking requirement. And the other unique aspect was the trip budget. So not only is there a square footage limitation at Bay Meadows, there's a limit on how much traffic can be generated. And so there were trip budgets that were created based upon the expected uses. If you maxed out the office and the residential, how many trips would be created. And then they were required to be mitigated both by mitigation measures and project investments and traffic fees, but also by traffic demand management measures. So there was a requirement that after the grade separation, the trip budgets had to be reduced to reflect the mixed use nature of the project. And that was the transit-oriented development component that was so important to the city. And there is transit monitoring in which driveway counts are run to make sure that the project meets its goals of trip reduction. And so far, Bay Meadows has always met, or in almost all cases exceeded, the expectations in terms of trip reduction. So how does the development agreement get implemented? All development is subject, all development is subject to development controls and the public benefit requirements. You have to do those. If it complies with the Bay Meadows specific plan and the requirements of the development agreement, it is considered fully entitled. You don't have to go back and start again. City's committed to timely process all approvals. No new environmental review is needed unless there's something that wasn't already studied in the EIR. And the development agreement has a provision that says, as part of the future processes, the city's not entitled to ask for anything more. The city still pays the project still pays standard processing fees and permit fees that are in effect at the time the building permits are pulled. But in connection with individual the SPAR applications, there are no additional exactions that the city can ask for. The idea is that all those exactions that otherwise could have been asked for were front-end loaded and paid 15 years ago. There's an annual review, which is what you're doing tonight. And then the Planning Commission reviews and confirms the compliance with the terms of the DA. And then for each proposed building, the Planning Commission still needs to review a SPAR relative to the specific plan and the design guidelines, but only with respect to that. That's the point of the site plan and architectural review, is to confirm consistency. Currently, all of the parcels at Bay Meadows have an approved SPAR. Over time, the project developer, to make sure that all the pieces fit together and were cohesive in terms of how they operated, put SPARs in place, but changes can occur and have occurred through the SPAR modification process over time, between the time the SPAR was approved and the time an actual end user for a particular building has been located. And I'm now going to turn it over to Janice Thatcher, who's the person who actually is the interface getting all these buildings built and working with the architects and designers to make the concepts that were in the specific plan a reality. Janice?
Thanks, Amy. Good evening, commissioners. Thanks for your time. So compared to Amy, I'm a newbie on the project, having only worked on it since, back in 2006. So I have been here since we first started processing the SPAR applications. And, rather than going through a process where we process the applications on a block by block basis, back in 2007, we initiated a process to design the overall project. And the thinking was that if we designed the 18 acres, all of the blocks at one time with a variety of architects, we would be able to show commissioners, the staff, the public, and ourselves what the project looked like and how the buildings fit together and how they were overall their consistency with the underlying entitlements that Amy described. The one exception to that is the block known as MU1 to the north there, which is where the Montara City Bridge Housing Project is located. We left that out because part of our requirement was to donate an acre of land, and that was the block that we had selected and weren't quite sure how the city wanted to move forward with that. So we left that out of that initial SPAR process. So we packaged the SPARs in 3 separate SPAR applications at the request of the city, just because it was a lot to bite off at one time. So the first SPAR were the yellow blocks located along Delaware Street, and then the orange blocks came next, and we finished up with the blocks shown in blue. If you see the blocks outlined in red on this map, those are blocks where we have gone through a SPAR modification process. So you all have reviewed those blocks and approved SPAR modifications for the projects outlined in red. We do have an application which we had a study session on for the blocks shown as MU2 and 3 for a SPAR modification, and we'll be back in front of you in June to discuss that further. Next slide, please, Emily. So Bay Meadows today. So I'm sure many of you have been out to Bay Meadows. I don't know how recently, but wanted to show you some pictures of how the project has developed out over time. The picture on the upper left-hand corner was an event we had when we first introduced the project to the public. It was, we were about to break ground on our first townhomes, and we had a super popular event where we invited the public in to look at the project. And this was just coming on the heels of the recession in 2008. So, timing was good in the sense that there were a lot of people who were quite interested in the project. Upper right-hand corner shows our community garden. So we have a community garden which has 99 plots that are gardened by our residents at Bay Meadows. A super popular amenity, and part of the private open space at Bay Meadows. In the lower left-hand corner, that's Paddock Park, which is one of the 1.5 acre public parks that, we designed and did a SPAR application for the public parks. We built them at our cost, and then we donated them to the city of San Mateo, and they're currently maintained by the city. Lower right-hand corner is the Fieldworks Breweries, which is, and many of you may have been to. It is located in front of Station Block 4 on Delaware Street. Super popular, both with the residents of Bay Meadows, but also for the city of San Mateo and beyond. Next, please. Again, some images of our open space and parks at Bay Meadows. Couple of images of the town square retail. So we have concentrated our food uses right now all around the town square. So we have Tin Pot, which is ice cream store, Blue Bottle Coffee, Rome Burger. Whitney mentioned that Slices just opened, the pizzeria. It's really good. I encourage you, if you haven't been there, to go try it out. So she just opened in April. One Medical is opening this summer, which our residents are super excited about. And then in the lower left-hand corner is the Morgan, which is the new apartment building that we recently opened that Whitney spoke about. So again, this is the chart that Amy showed that is the entitled uses pursuant to the specific plan. Shown in blue is where we expect to end up at Bay Meadows. So 1.2 million square feet of office space and 1,048 homes. So we're, right, consistent with the entitlements in the specific plan. Some of the community amenities at Bay Meadows, we have 3 public parks, 1 12-acre community park, and then 2 1.5-acre parks. Affordable housing is 10% within each of the residential buildings, plus the 68-unit Montara project. Great separated crossings. I'm sure many of you seen 28th Street is open. New Hillsdale Station, super exciting. The Nueva School, and then we have a public art program. An example is shown in the image to the right, which is a sculpture that is in the town square. Bay Meadows was always designed to be a transit-oriented development, and we've done some surveys to try to measure how we are faring relative to that goal. So pre-pandemic, 43% of our residents commuted by Caltrain. Our garages are 67 to 73% utilized based on our garage counts. Over half of the SurveyMonkey employees and subtenants use alternative modes of transportation, and the project is fully compliant with the Bay Meadows Traffic and Parking Management Plan, as well as the TMA that Amy described. Our next residential building is permit ready, 54 units, and we currently have 2 office buildings under construction. So in summary, this chart shows where we are with Bay Meadows. The yellow indicates the office buildings along Delaware Street. The 3 station block buildings, known as stations 2, 3, and 4, are 100% complete, leased to great tenants. Stations 1 and 5 are under construction. And as an aside, we all wondered, with many of us working at home for the past year, how office space was going to fare going forward with all this discussion of remote work. But we're pleased at the interest we're getting from really good quality tenants, and the office market does seem to be coming back, as we're all reading in the paper about Google and other users going back to the office. On the east side of Delaware Street, we show mixed use blocks 2 and 3, which has the SPAR modification application pending. And then the balance of the gray area is housing. And then with the Nueva School shown in the tan up to the north. So that concludes our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions that you or the public has. And I will go off camera.
Well, thank you to Whitney, Amy, Janice, and Emily for your presentation. We appreciate that. Why don't we start off with questions from the commissioners on any of the slides that were shown tonight? Does anyone have questions?
Question.
Mike, do you want to start?
I have a question. Yeah, through the chair. For Ms. Thatcher, you mentioned that there are currently 1,048 residential units.
No, there will be upon completion. Upon completion.
Upon completion, okay. Does that include the future residential units for MU2 and MU3, which you mentioned there's going to be a SPAR modification pending, or is that excluding any residential units in MU2 and
It
MU3?
includes the residential units that are in the SPAR modification application for MU2 and 3.
And how many residential units is counted in that?
68.
68. And how many residential units are in the already approved SPAR for MU2 and MU3 that was previously approved in the design guideline exceptions previously approved?
It's about 150.
150, okay. And then the only other question I have, Ms. Thatcher, so would you say that the office space in the station 1 through 5, would you say that, how has that been affected over the last year? So say, occupation a year ago versus now. You mentioned that there's interest, but how is actual occupation stand right now?
Well, all of our tenants are abiding by whatever the health authority regulations are in place at the time. So it's varied. We've for much of this time, people have not been in the office. All of our tenants are looking forward to coming back to work. Some of them do have limited numbers of people in the office today, but they're all, all of our tenants are, current on their rent. They're excited to come back to Bay Meadows. They're excited about the new Caltrain station and the underpass. So super excited about the changes there. So, I think much of it is because of the types of tenants that we are attracted to Bay Meadows. So we've got some very strong tech-based tenants who are you know, pretty adept at working remotely, but really looking forward to coming back to the office.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions.
Thank you.
Margaret, do you have questions?
I had a couple, but they've actually been answered, I think, in the presentation. So it was very thorough and complete. I appreciate it. It was actually great to also kind of get the history. I don't think I really realized all the kind of early how long the project had how long ago it was started. The only thing I guess it wasn't really that I didn't quite catch was that wasn't answered was there was a comment made about the parking requirements and how that is flexible over time. So I guess as parking requirements change. So I mean, the parking requirements have become less restrictive, I guess, in terms of the numbers over time, and particularly in this location due to it being next to transit. But I guess I just wanted to know what else, how else, what else is affected by the requirement that the parking is flexible. I don't know if that question was, if that was very well understood. I guess I'm wondering, what does that mean? What else does that mean that it needs to be flexible?
I think maybe Janice is in a better position to answer it in practice. From a specific plan standpoint, it's based upon demand estimation. So it's a unique way of doing parking. Instead of saying, gee, there'll be four spaces per 1,000 square feet, it's a range, and it's determined based upon the mix of uses and how many spaces are expected to be used in practice. And exactly what you pointed out, Commissioner, as the transit usage has increased, that is an opportunity to say we don't need as much parking. So as you saw SurveyMonkey, with half the people coming not in an automobile, it enables to have lower parking ratios.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I don't, did I say that right, Janice? I mean,
yeah, you did. And Commissioner Williams, the thing I would add to that is, first of all, I don't think back in 2005, anybody, we probably weren't, able to see what was going to happen in the future, but it's actually has worked out quite well in terms of supporting the transit-oriented development notion. Based on the research we did, the commission did approve lower parking requirements for stations 1 and 5 than we had in stations 2 through 4. And, it's really based on the transit usage, what's going on in other peninsula cities, and some of the, what we're seeing at Bay Meadows. So it does allow for flexibility, and it does, tenants and residents choose Bay Meadows because of the transit opportunities. There's just no question. It's, our residents love being close to Caltrain. The office users, having the ability to have their employees you have Caltrain available to them is really important to them in terms of recruiting and retaining the type of talent they need. So I think it's all supportive of the transit-oriented development.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Romero, do you have any questions?
I have a follow-up question to that. So the survey that was done with SurveyMonkey on capacity, on parking, and the trip counts, that was done before pre-COVID, right? Like 2017 to 2018?
I maybe Whitney will know the exact date. I don't remember. Everything's a blur pre-COVID, but it was done pre-COVID. And, we actually went into the garages and did counts to make sure that, just to see how people, we had heard from them that over half of their people took transit, but we wanted to actually, complete the thought and, do the counts in the garages.
Okay, thank you. That's my question I have, Chair.
Thank you. My question was answered with Mike's question, so we're all good there. I'd like to open the public comment period if there is anyone waiting to do that. Mary, do we have anyone from the public?
There's nobody raising their hand for public comment.
Okay, thank you. So we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commissioners for any additional discussion. We do have a vote on a resolution, so if there's anything that you all would like to discuss, we can do that now.
None here.
Nothing to discuss. Okay.
No.
So, Julia, you said that you had a slide with our resolution. Can we see that, please? Okay. That's great. So we will entertain a motion if someone would be so good as to make one.
Oh, can I just ask before we enter the resolution, are these dates right? December 2018 to December 2019, and December 2019 to December 2020? Are they meant to overlap in 2019? That review period?
Oh, it should be December 20th, 2019, and then December 21st, 2019 to 21st, 2020.
So, and this is Gabrielle Whelan. I think the gist of it is that the state law requires an annual review. We weren't able to do the annual review because of COVID. So one option would be to say for the 2 annual review periods running from December 20th, 2018 and ending December 21st, 2020.
Okay.
Would that be your preference?
I don't have a preference. That seems the simplest, or alternatively, we could say we could call out each separate review period, or we could just say for the 2 review periods.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would say, Julia, is that you? Or is that Mary? I would say 2 review periods beginning December 20th, 2018 and ending December 21st, 2020.
Okay.
And maybe, I'm sorry, I would put annual before review.
Okay, super. Thank you. Mike, does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
If there are no more comments, everyone's agreeable. Okay, so I'll make a motion to adopt, for commission to adopt a resolution finding that Bay Meadows Main Track Investors LLC has complied in good faith with the terms of the Bay Meadows Phase 2 Development Agreement for the 2 annual review periods beginning December 20, 2018 and ending December 21st, 2020.
Thank you. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay. Mary, would you call a voice vote, please?
Yes. Chair Mallory.
Yes.
Vice Chair Maldonado.
Yes.
John Ebnetter is absent. Commissioner Etheridge.
Yes.
Commissioner Williams.
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes 4-0. Thank you to all of you for your presentations. Very much appreciated.
Yes.
Next order of business is our reports and announcements. Julia?
So I wanted to mention the next Planning Commission meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, May 11th. We currently have one item on the agenda, and that's the Kiku Crossings. That's the downtown affordable housing project and the public garage. So that's coming back before the commission for modification. And so we'll have more information with the packet when that comes before you. Additionally, I wanted to mention that there's a makeup session for the housing element introduction workshop, and that's coming up on it's actually on the strivesanmateo.org website in terms of registration information, but that is coming up on May 4th starting at 6 p.m., ending at 7:30 p.m. And so that's the introduction to the housing element virtual workshop number 3. Additionally, past workshops on the general plan and introduction to housing element workshop video and presentation materials are posted on the website. So anybody who missed those meetings and is interested to watch and catch up, they can certainly go to strivesanmateo.org to look up that information. And so that concludes staff's reports.
Julia, is the May 4th workshop an addition then? It's an added one. So what is being done to get word out? That's a pretty quick turnaround.
The housing team is sending out the information and promoting it through social media. And so we're using the same channels to try to promote the information, the same channels, including the people who attended the first meeting where the video presentation was a little bit, there was some confusion with the video. And so we're intending to make up for that first session.
So then I attended that first session. So how would I be getting notice, or should I have already received it?
I will double check, but in theory, everybody who signed up for that first meeting should have received an email, or that should be coming up soon. I'll double check on that.
Okay, I would be curious to know because I like to watch, obviously I like to watch those things, but no, I have not received anything, and I went to the first one, just FYI.
Okay, I will check and make sure to follow up.
Okay, thanks. Would anyone like to comment or ask questions on the reports and announcements? Okay, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.